The Oracle of Omaha, he sent his annual letter to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders over the weekend, Saturday India time, 6:30 p.m. to be precise. While Buffett chose to focus on corporate governance this time around, he did put in words on US equities and the lack of any big acquisitions over the past few years. So let me take you to the 3 or 4 key things that stood out for me in the annual letter, also from somebody who's looking at India equities. So one, the clear preference for equity over debt. I think that was the key thing that Warren Buffett to my mind, came about. He said, and I quote, that what we can say is that if something close to current rates should prevail over the coming decades, which is in the current tax rates and interest rates, and if the corporate tax rates also remain near the low level businesses now enjoy, it is almost certain that equities over time will perform better than long-term fixed rate debt instruments. There's a lot of conversation around whether the debt-rated debt instruments are better bets as compared to equities. I think Warren Buffett's view out there is very clear, but remember, he thinks very, very long term. However, he mentioned about for himself and Charlie Munger as a combined view that they continue to bet on US equities. He mentions, and I quote again, that anything can happen to stock prices tomorrow. Then he's also said in this that they may actually plummet quite strongly, but the combination of the American tailwind and the compounding wonders will make equities the much better long-term choice. This is again in the annual letter. So, the Oracle is clearly betting on equities being the fulcrum of his holdings and what investors could largely or should largely do. Something that he's spoken about a number of times, but he's reiterated out here, which is the task of forecasting interest rates. He says that forecasting interest rates has never been our game, and Charlie and I have no idea what rates will average over the next year or 10 or 30 years. Our perhaps jaundiced view is that the pundits who opine on these subjects reveal by that very behavior, which is of forecasting, far more about themselves than they reveal about the future. And I think this is Warren Buffett's maybe not pet peeve, but something that he keeps on speaking about, that how is it that economists or anybody else can really forecast what will happen to economy or rates at a point of time when the best of minds have failed consistently over the last few years. So this is his 2 bits on rates and how they could go ahead. He, of course, speaks about acquisitions as well in a meaningful way, because he's spoken about how the growth of Berkshire Hathaway over the last few years has happened through acquisitions, naturally so. He mentions that I have concluded that acquisitions are similar to marriage. They start, of course, with a joyful wedding, but then reality tends to diverge from prenuptial expectations. Sometimes, wonderfully, the new union delivers bliss beyond either party's hopes, and in other cases, disillusionment is swift. And I think in some parts to the letter, if I'm not wrong, is referred to how Berkshire Hathaway has also had both the pluses and the minuses with these acquisitions. Speaking of acquisitions, CEOs and boards, which was also one dominant theme in the letter, and by the way, all of this or some of this is then on our website BloombergQuint.com, so you should log in and read about that. But he mentions that acquisition proposals remain a particularly vexing problem for board members. The legal orchestration for making deals has been refined and expanded, but I have yet to see a CEO who craves an acquisition being an informed and articulate critic to argue against it, and yes, include me amongst the guilty. And then, of course, there are some fun quotes about what could happen, how he might seek some refuge under some sections if indeed he's caught under the web of fire. Not in as many words, but I'm just making this up based on my recollection of that letter. So it's a very interesting read. Not a single mention of Asia, China, or India in this letter, thus at least the letter that came out. Maybe on May 2nd, when the Berkshire Hathaway annual general meeting comes up, I think there will be questions to him about that, and he'll be sure to answer that. But this was some highlight, or these were some highlights of the letter that I could make out and thought I'd bring it to you because it could be an interesting